Hello, it's Phil Croshaw here again from Passions, and in this episode I'm delighted to be welcoming music Svengali Nick Stewart to the show. Enjoy. Nick, very warm welcome to Passions. Tell us what your passion is and all about yourself.
Well, I'm really delighted to be here, Phil. Thank you for having me. I see I'm number 82 on your list, which is very high praise. The number of people you could have got to talk about their passions run into the mid-thousands. So to get on, it's very kind of you to have me. My passion is music, a little bit of music, a little bit of film, a little bit of sport, but mainly music. I put that passion down to starting when I was at school. I was at a boarding school in Crowthorne, Berkshire. I'd actually been to a pre-prep school, boarding school. I've been damn nearly institutionalized all my life, but that's another story. But I was at a prep school, and I developed, as small boys of the age of 8 and 9 do, chickenpox, and I was confined to barracks, confined to bed. And the matron on this particular gorgeous Sunday afternoon took pity on me and gave me her radio. Not something I believe I'd ever listened to before. Now that may seem quite incredible to your viewers that, you know, in 1960, this was 1960, that no radios, but radios did obviously exist. There was the light program and all this. But hearing music on the radio, which turned out to be Pick of the Pops with Alan Freeman, was an absolutely sort of mind-blowing experience. I mean, I'd never heard pop music before. I'd had a little bit of Pirates of Penzance and The King and I, but it actually was life-changing. I can see that small child with chickenpox lying in a bed, listening to Pick of the Pops and Fluff Freeman, going down the top 20 of wherever it was in June 1960, and it was an extraordinary moment.
So was there a time when you look back, was there a time where you thought, I really would love to turn this interest or passion into a career? And did it happen through a driving motivation or almost by accident in terms of that movement into the industry?
I did decide to do that when I was at school. I then went onto a public school, boarding school. I did decide then that that's what I really wanted to do. I wasn't somebody. I wasn't going to become a lawyer. I didn't think, although I wouldn't have minded having a go at that, to be honest. I wasn't going to be a priest, and I wasn't going to be a doctor. So the sort of three great, career paths was the thing. My father slightly, I think, unkindly suggested that going to university would be a waste of time. Funnily enough, he did me a favor, because what I did was I self-educated myself from the age of 25 to 55. So that was, in some ways, I'm rather glad I developed interest in the arts, capital A, during that time. Anyway, I decided I decided through my friends who'd been to the same school, who'd been successful. And so David Enthoven and Johnny Gaydon started EG, which was Roxy Music, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and King Crimson. And I got to know them well. I pestered them like a small pestering person. And eventually, through giving them some ideas and giving them, I gave them a single on Private Stock Records out of New York, which I managed to get sent to me, called Sex Offender, by a band called Wind in the Willows. And that turned out to be Blondie. And then when I was in the army, based in Londonderry, I went to see a band called Jimmy James and the Undertones. which turned out to be the Undertones. I actually heard Teenage Kicks before John Peel did. But so that's where it came. And I then got introduced to Chris Blackwell at Island Records, and he took me on, and that was the start of it, really.
Oh, absolutely amazing. Was there anybody that you would say when you first heard their songs or their music that you thought these guys, it was mainly guys, and obviously Blondie's female, but was there any kind of better you came across and you thought these are going to really make it?
It's a good question, that, and I'll tell you why it's a good question. Because when you hear something that's unknown and no one else has heard it, and you hear it, and you go, "Oh, I like that." Do you know? Do you like it? Does your bellwether tell you it has the chance of being commercially successful? Because that's what you're really asking me.
Yeah.
So I'm driving in my car, going to play cricket, and I hear Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing demo, Radio London, Charlie Gillett. I know that's a winner. But so did 16 other A&R men, including Nigel Granger, I think got there first. Lucian's brother. So yes, there were a few. I heard REM. I heard Killing Joke, and I signed Killing Joke. Strangely enough, with U2, who I signed to Island Records, that was based off seeing them play live. And the music came, that came later, as it were. I saw them as being a live act that had enormous potential as musicians and songwriters, singers, and everything else. And I was right, but I mean, I got lucky, really, in some ways. But I was lucky. So what skills do I have? It's identifying. I could put up something now that came into me yesterday by a band called Marlowe, who I look after and assigned to my little label, Man in the Moon. I know that's once upon a time that would have been a hit. We could have taken it to radio, made a video. We've made a really good video of it, which we've got. I know that's a hit, but the rules now have changed. Completely changed. And now you have to convince 16 million people on TikTok and Spotify and social media that before anybody else will pay any attention to you. And that wheel will turn back, by the way, because it's ridiculous. There's a sort of, at the moment, a remarkable sweet spot in America. Very interesting. I think this is really interesting. There's a band called The National. Aaron and Matt, right?
Yeah.
And they've been around for a while. They have a new album coming out called The First Two Pages of Frankenstein. Odd title. We'll find out what it's all about. But The National are involved with all sorts of other artists. So Taylor Swift is working with The National. Lana Del Rey works with Taylor Swift. A band called The Beths are going on tour with The National. There's Sharon Van Etten, Angel Olsen. I mean, there's a whole little thing there going on of just great talent. And they're all doing it for themselves. And are there lots of A&R men running around going, "Oh, this is good"? I don't know. But what I do know is that right now, if you said to me, what's the best band in the world? A year ago, I'd have said The War on Drugs. And they are still a very good band. But right now, the best band in the world are The National. And their extent and their influence is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much. I mean, we could talk for an hour about the changes that have happened. On a very personal note, I read somewhere that you had a dalliance with the Thompson twins. I think I read somewhere. Is that right?
I signed them.
Yeah, they were a big band. I was a big fan of the Thompson twins back in the day.
No, I signed them. And my dear mentor and boss, Chris Blackwell, had a vision of the two bowler-hatted detectives in Tintin and refused to sign them and tore the contract up. Oh. So off they went to Arista. He, by the way, as he told me with a smile afterwards, he said he had to listen to them making that huge record in Nassau studios, cursing everything that was cursable, including probably me, for not insisting on it. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating, that. Fascinating. So obviously everything's changed massively. Do you think then that is it a great are there greater opportunities now for bands and groups and artists in the fact that they can get their music out and direct to the public around the world
Oh,
almost immediately?
no, it's much harder.
It's harder,
Much,
right?
oh,
Explain what
gosh,
you
yes,
mean by that.
much harder. Well, it's look. I think I'm right in saying 3,900 tracks a day get loaded up onto DSPs.
Right.
I actually thought it was more than that, but that's a number I've seen. Some of them come from record labels. Some of them come from people's bedrooms. Some of them come from God knows where. But the amount of music that's now being made, sung, done, and everything else is ridiculously high.
So
And
in effect then is it oversupply in effect?
oh, huge,
Yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
huge oversupply. So you have to come up with something else to grab attention. Would Inhaler, who are by the way very good, before anybody jumps at me, have made any progress if the lead singer wasn't Bono's son? Because there are quite a lot of rock bands out there, but that was an edge they had. Good luck to them, by the way, and they are good.
Right. So that the old adage of it's who you know is arguably.
Well, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. If I send my album or my tracks to I send my tracks up to A&R departments and the major labels and the minor labels and all the rest of it. And they often think it's very good, but there's always something saying, well, they need more of this and they need more. So once upon a time, people would come and see me. I used to have things called surgeries, and I would say, this is good, but this isn't for Ireland, or this is very good and this is for Ireland. I didn't always get my way, but and I did with the Thompson twins. Teardrop Explodes, I signed them, and Chris didn't want to have them, and then signed Julian Cope 2 years later.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but that's all right. We got him in the end. They came through. Man, the marvelous Julian Cope. I worked with Grace Jones, Robert Palmer, Steve Winwood. I mean, they were all fantastic artists. Some of them were there already. Some of them we took in different directions.
So you mentioned a second ago about U2 and signing them, and you were talking, as I read it, what you said, you were basically saying that you signed them based on the performance as much as the music. Is that now live music is such a big thing? Is it fair to say that the performance is a very critical part of that process of success?
Well, I've always made it that.
Yeah.
Things changed. Can they? The first question was, who wrote in the surgery? Who wrote it? They did. Okay, right. Well, it's either very, very good, or no, it's not very good. So if they wrote it themselves and it's very, very good, or very, very interesting, or whatever it may be, you think great. So they can play. They can play. They can write, and can they then perform? So you then go and see them perform. So if those 2-3 boxes are ticked, you've got a chance. Because even if it takes you a long time, like it did with Genesis and Supertramp and one or two other bands that came through the progressive rock era, you learn your trade. Adam Clayton wasn't much of a bass player, but he learned and became a very good one. Mike Rutherford was a very talented musician, great guitar player, actually. So he was one of the nubs that made Genesis work. But it took Genesis 2 or 3 albums to get to the point that they were filling up stadiums. They learned their craft.
In the age of, I think it's a very interesting point, because in the age of what I would call instant gratification, are there a lot of bands that have dreams, shall we say, and then maybe a year, 2 years later, they've not popped and they're not sort of, huge around the world? Do they get a little bit bored or a little bit down, and as a result, don't see it through? Is that common?
No, they run out of money.
Fair enough, yeah.
they run out of money because, there are three methods of doing it. One is that you go to mum and dad, the bank of mum and dad, and you try and get some money out of them, or you go to a record company and or publishing company, or you go to some friends who do a crowdfund or whatever. The interesting thing is that, somebody like Kate Bush that was nurtured and looked after by her record company, having been introduced by the great David Gilmour, and at EMI, and she was looked after. And do you know what I mean? It was sometimes something comes in that you just go, oh my God, get that out. Why does Shady Procol Harum? That's a bloody hit. Get it out.
Yeah.
Every power station in England played it. Everybody heard it. Came out, big hit. Boom. Thanks very much. With little Kate, there had to be, it was going to be nurturing and looking after and getting the song and getting it all right. They did a brilliant job. You don't realise, back in the day, how brilliant A&R men were. I'm not saying I was, but there were some brilliant A&R men. And I know you're going to say, well, are there any now? And the answer is, yeah, there are one or two. There are one or two. But not doing that particular thing, because quite often, it arrives ready to go. That didn't. Interesting enough, this artist, Ray, you come across her. This artist, she's on Polydor. She's a great, great songwriter. She's a very good singer, and she's made a very good debut album. But it's not for Polydor, because Polydor didn't want to make an album with her. So she said, well, actually, bad luck. I've made a few bob out of some of the songs I've written for various people, including, I think she wrote one for Beyonce or whatever. Anyway, she said, oh, well, I'll go and do it on my own then. She made an album that was #1 in the charts on her own. And she left a major label to do, I mean, it's, I haven't yet met anybody at Polydor, or indeed Universal for that matter, who has explained to me satisfactorily what happened. I'd like to meet the young lady concerned, because she's clearly a talent and she'll go on to do great things. And some other label, major label, probably Sony or Warner's, will snaffle her up and she'll go on to be a big success. And I want to talk to those people at Polydor and say, so what happened? What did you think you had? And what didn't you do for her? I mean, artists. I was talking to 2 artists last night from America. They said, well, this is what we want to do. I said, well, let's do it then. They said, well, are you sure? I said, you're the artist. You've got the vision. If the vision and the songs and if it's all rubbish, I'll tell you. But right now, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They said, oh, well, no one's ever told us that before. I said, well, it's the first time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of reports during lockdown were that artists, and some very well-known artists, were producing their own albums and their own singles.
Yeah, they were.
From their own home, based around the technological advances of the last few years of high quality microphones and high quality mixers and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Which is fascinating. Now, obviously, things are always moving on, and one of the areas that one of the reasons we came across each other was this thing that you're doing, this software that you're doing called TCAT. So just give me a bit of an insight into what TCAT is and how you got involved in it.
Well, TCAT basically is to catch a thief. This is to stop pirate. I'm going to keep this short and sharp because I don't want to get lost in the weeds of technology. I will tell you that it discovers piracy infringements on DSPs. And in case there's anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's a digital streaming platform. I mean Spotify, Apple, Deezer, etc.
Your digital music revenue is potentially being lost to unauthorized exploitation globally in digital stores and to lost content in your library. This is difficult to manually monitor and control. TCAT, the technical copyright analysis tool, polices and monitors these stores to protect ownership and revenues for rights owners, such as music labels, publishers and artists. TCAT can pick any artist, release or individual track and collate live data across digital stores, discovering valuable insights into pricing, chart information and territorial availability. Critically, TCAT finds instances of unauthorized and infringing music, duplicated releases, and unlawful exploitation of public domain across differing territories. Some releases fall by the wayside during the delivery process, not reaching the intended store, or are lost to partial album re-releasing on the journey from LP to streaming. TCAT produces instant reports giving detailed analysis for review to ensure continuous content monitoring. On finding unauthorized releases, TCAT can issue a challenge on behalf of the rights owner or aggregator and can offer a digital takedown and revenue recovery service. After the takedown of the disputed content, TCAT continues with the monitoring service on your releases to identify further instances of conflict, whether you need to police an existing library or undergo a due diligence content exercise. TCAT offers a comprehensive service to monitor your content, protect your rights, and maximize your revenue.
There's always been piracy in the music business. You know, people stealing samples, not paying for them, people doing this, people. And I'm afraid to say there's a bit of piracy at the moment on the DSPs. And this very clever piece of technology, right? Very clever piece of technology finds it and deals with it. And I've come in to run this company with some very, very clever young people and give them the opportunity to get this product out in the marketplace, talk to record companies, publishing. Today already, Phil, I have spoken to a record label, a distribution label, an internationally well-known household name songwriter. So I'm constantly just, you know, churning it through, and not a single person has turned it down yet.
Well, I guess it's it must be cat and mouse. I mean, the size of YouTube and obviously the other thing I think, Nick, as well, I think some people, certainly perhaps maybe younger people, there's a bit of confusion as to what they think they can and can't do. You know, they think that if I play a 20-second clip from running up that hill, or a 15-second clip from Robbie Williams, that's okay. But it's not, is it, as I understand it?
Well, when you say play a clip, in the sense of what? I mean,
of a music track. So they might say have a YouTube channel and they'll play a 20-second music clip from a full 3.5-minute song and think that's okay. Yeah, to their own video. Like if we did it now, I did this channel.
That's right. I get you. I just wanted. I think there is I think you might be right. I might have to make a note of that. Might there be education required? Yes, there might be. I mean, dishonest people haunt the earth and have done since the year zero. But it's an interesting point you make. And people do make mistakes, and people are losing money. They're losing revenue. Publishers, writers, record labels, artists losing money. And with the AI thing coming in now, that's going to be, that's going to get quite brutal. AI, and then there's pitch shifting and speeding stuff up and all the stuff on TikTok. It is quite. I hate the expression Wild West, because it's not Wild West. It's much more sophisticated than that. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And a company like TCAT needs to be there to interface and react and everything else. It is amazing the sophistication that we have within the major labels. Very high qualified people, and yet they still want to talk to us and they still want to use us. It's impressive.
Well, it's such a huge area, and I guess without the technological advances, it's impossible to police, isn't it?
Yeah,
on a global scale.
It is.
So tell me, and you mentioned when we just before we came on air, you mentioned about you got a couple of other passions, which I think you said was music and sport. I beg your pardon, movies and sport. What's your favorite movie genre, or do you like all films?
I don't really, funnily enough, have. I mean, I suppose you could say film noir or thrillers or whatever. I fell in love with the cinema at school because we had, again, sixth form film clubs showing, they weren't showing The Magnificent Seven or Bridge on the River Kwai. They were showing Citizen Kane and, films of Brunel and others of that ilk. Truffaut, and I remember seeing my first Jean-Luc Godard at school. So I'm talking about, experimental cinema and avant-garde and all the rest of it. So we watched a lot of that, and I found that fascinating. I like a good movie with a good script. I had the great thrill in my life of meeting the great William Goldman, who won several Oscars, as you know. And I asked him what the secret was, and he said, well, it's very simple. It's very simple, Nicholas. He said, very simple. It's just three things. It's just three things. It's script, and script. And I kind of remembered that, and I thought, and he also made it clear, not in a shy way, that if you saw a movie with more than one writer, beware. And actually, funnily enough, how many movies have you seen, particularly recently in the month, which have one writer, which are really good, and then ones that have seven, you think, oh, holy cow, what's going to happen here? And sports, the other one. I'm a huge fan. I was reasonably good at sport as a young man, cricket, rugby. I still play a bit of golf. So yeah, I'm very lucky. I've loved my sport and the twin peaks of now there's a little anecdote I can tell you. Twin peaks of music and films. So the man that wrote Twin Peaks is called who?
Oh, crikey, I couldn't tell you that.
Okay, he's called Mark Frost.
Right.
Mark Frost also wrote two books. One is called The Greatest Game Ever Played, which is the story of the 1913 Open Golf Championship at Chicago, won by Francis Ouimet, who was an amateur out of the caddy shed. And another one called The Match, which is the story of a game played at the Crosby Clanby. So there is sport, there's sport, and there's movies, Twin Peaks, and there's the music within Twin Peaks. So those three things all collide in that one little anecdote.
So if you had to choose one sport, you're on a desert island and you can play one sport. I was going to say.
Well, the trouble is, of course, you'd pick golf because you can play that on your own. I probably would choose golf, but my real love was cricket.
Yeah, and who do you follow? Do you follow a particular?
Well, I played for Hampshire as a young man. I then played for Surrey as a slightly older man. So, but Hampshire, funnily enough, Hampshire are my thing. Yeah.
Fabulous. Right. Okay. I know you have to go, Nick. I'm really, really, really grateful that you.
Well, what fun it's been. I hope I haven't bored everybody, but
no, not at all. We need to get you on again, actually.
I will leave you with one thought for those that are
Please do. Please do.
If you have a desire to do something, it doesn't matter what it is, by the way, but if you want to get into the music business or get into the film business or get into whatever it may be, go and do it. Don't let anybody stop you. Give it your absolute best shot, because that's all you can do. And don't be afraid of saying to your mum and dad or your auntie or your uncle or your best friend at school, somebody in there, you get me in there. Or just turn up, knock on the door. People these days are good at that. I never done anybody away from coming in and having 15, 20 minutes. I can't guarantee I'm going to give them a job, but I'd always see them. Everybody should see them. Everybody should help each other. And I find in the music business nowadays people do that. They do it in the movie business to a certain extent. Not sure about sport. I don't know enough about the mechanics of getting into it. But let everybody that sees this look at those discs. Behind me, you'll see the great John Peel. There he is, the old master. And then we've got the Eagles and U2 and the Bunnymen. I got lucky and I had a wonderful time and I've been, had a great life. And I did it through bashing on people's doors and trying to get in. Am I any good at it? I don't know. I just do it.
That's a great piece of advice, though, is ask, if you don't ask, you don't get. And all those cliches, though, but they're so true. And people, I speak to my kids all the time about saying, just ask, just try, give it a go. And a lot don't and won't, and they miss out, I think. And it's one of the other things I would say as we close is that, as you know, as I was saying, I've done a lot of these interviews now, and it's amazing how many people talk about being lucky. And I always challenge it because I always think that, luck is an interesting thing. And I think it's cliche again, but I think you can create your own luck if you push enough doors.
Well, if you work hard, put the hours in and all that, if you do that, it's amazing how lucky you get.
Absolutely.
So
Nick, thanks very much.
On that bombshell, I'll say
thanks very much.
Well, most enjoyable, Phil. Thank you very much for having me
No,
on.
thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It's been very interesting. I always take a number of takeaways from these interviews, and this is no different.
Very good.
Take care, Nick. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.